Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts about the 40K universe. I am your host, Gershwin, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about the Primarchs as we get into the whereabouts of the Traitor Primarchs. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K content every single day. Now, we've already created a video for the whereabouts of the Loyalist Primarchs, so check that out after this video. And of course, if you have any suggestions, just comment down below. We'll try to get to your request. With that said, let's get into 40 facts on the whereabouts of the Traitor Primarchs. Fulcrum was the Primarch of the Emperor's Children Traitor Legion. Following the Horus Heresy, Fulcrum was last seen in real space fighting Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines chapter, and its successors. During this great duel, Fulcrum proved too crafty and skillful, sliding Guilliman's throat with his toxic Chaos Sword that had nearly slain Horus himself without the intervention of the Chaos Gods to heal him. Guilliman was placed within a stasis field and returned to the Ultramarines' homeworld of Macragge, where his body became a focus of devotion of countless generations of Imperial pilgrims, while Fulcrum retreated into the warp. Perhaps the greatest mystery surrounds the fate of the Primarch Fulcrum, for it appears that he disappeared entirely. Some say that the Dark Prince of Chaos granted him apotheosis, and he assumed the mantle of a demon Primarch. His mortal shape transformed into a serpentine form with 4 arms, very similar to the appearance of the lair Xenos that Fulcrum and his legion had exterminated when he began his fall to chaos. There are those that claim that Fulcrum has retreated to some demon world of his own creation, and rules there still, overseeing such debased extremes of sensation and experiences as no mortal man can imagine. Some of those who revere Slaanesh regard this mythical place as the Holy of Holies and spend entire lifetimes obsessively questing after it. To this day, many of the scattered surviving warbands of the Emperor's Children and the agents of the Inquisition's Ordo Malleus seek the location of this world, but none have yet returned with that information. Theriault, sometimes called the Lord of Iron, is the Primarch of the Iron Warriors Traitor Legion. After fleeing Terra along with the other traitor legions following Horus's death, Theriault took the opportunity to take vengeance on the Imperial Fists with a specially designed trap on the world of Sebastus IV. The trap was known as the Eternal Fortress, a massive keep centered within 20 square miles of bunkers, towers, minefields, trenches, tank traps, and redoubts that were intentionally shaped to look like an 8-pointed star of chaos. Upon hearing of the existence of this supposedly impregnable fortress by his legion's hated rivals, Rogal Dorn publicly declared that he would dig Theriault out of his hole and bring him back to Terra in an iron cage. Rogal Dorn expected an honorable battle, but this was not to be, beginning by isolating the 4 companies of the Imperial Fist that arrived to do battle from their orbital support. Theriault began to carefully divide his enemies and destroy them piece by piece. Some Imperial Fists managed to penetrate the defenses and reach the center of the Eternal Fortress, only to find there was no central keep, simply an open space watched by yet more defenses. The fortress was a decoy of no real value, surrounded by 20 miles of killing ground. By the 6th day of the siege, Imperial Fist Space Marines were fighting individually without support, using the bodies of their own battle brothers for cover. The siege of the Eternal Fortress, later referred to in Imperial histories simply as the Battle of the Iron Cage, lasted for a further 3 weeks. Relief came in the form of Guilliman and his Ultramarines, who drove off the Iron Warriors, but the siege left Rogal Dorn a broken man and rendered the Imperial Fist chapter unable to fight for 19 standard years while they rebuilt their forces. The gene seed of over 400 Imperial Fists was captured by the Iron Warriors in the Iron Cage, and later sacrificed to the nefarious purposes of the Dark Gods, an accomplishment of which Theriault was also finally elevated to the rank of Demon Prince of Chaos Undivided by the rare acclamations of the ruinous powers. Following this victory, the Iron Warriors fled to the Eye of Terror alongside their fellow Traitor Marines and secured a new demon world named Medrungard, crafting a terrible demonic fortress where his sons ruled a miserable slave population from vast citadels of iron and stone. Today, Perturabo has become a giant of terrible rages and spontaneous violence. Despite appearing at ease around his subordinates, those who knew him best saw the underlying simmering tensions in the Primarch's body, like a taut cable at the very limit of its tensile strength, ready to strike at a moment's notice. Conrad Kurz, better known as the Night Hunter, was the commander of the Traitor Legion of Chaos Space Marines, known as the Night Lords. After the invasion of Terra by the forces of Chaos and the death of Horus at the hands of the Emperor, the Night Lords did not splinter and flee into the Eye of Terror like the rest of the Traitor Legions. Instead, they continued to attack the Imperium in its eastern fringes. However, their tactics seemed to change. Betraying a self-destructive desperation, the Emperor himself, wishing to disband the Night Lords forever, dispatched half of the Calidus Temple of Assassins to terminate the renegade Primarch. Legend has it that a lone agent named Mishan was purposefully allowed to infiltrate the Legion's lair and confront the fallen Primarch, now a naked and hunched monster. Before his death, Mishan's video log recorded the Night Hunter's enigmatic last words. "Your presence does not surprise me, assassin. I have known of you ever since your craft entered the eastern fringes. Why did I not have you killed? Because your mission and the act you're about to commit proves the truth of all I have ever said or done. I merely punish those who have wronged, just as your false emperor now seeks to punish me. Death is nothing compared to vindication." The final remembrance of Conrad Kurz is of mad, black eyes and a cruel, lipless smile, aware that his horrific vision had all come to pass. The video log of the event then shows Mishan leaping forward at the Primarch. However, the kill was never confirmed, as the video feed cuts out right before the fight ensued. It is believed that the Night Hunter allowed himself to be killed. He saw himself as a murderous and corrupt villain, the very thing he sought to destroy. Regardless, his final words are considered one of the greatest enigmas in the Imperium's history. Angron, sometimes called the Red Angel, is the Primarch of the World Eaters. Angron sightings in the Materium have been mercifully rare in the millennia after the Horus Heresy, since it appears that the Demon Primarch is busy either prosecuting his patron's wars with the other forces of chaos, or ruling his personal demon world within the Eye of Terror. There are, however, two well-documented occasions after the end of the Horus Heresy, when Angron himself led the Blood God's forces against the Imperium. In the mid-38th millennium, Angron and 50,000 Chaos Space Marines and troops, drawn from other forces of Chaos, slaughtered their way through a large swaths of Imperial space. For over 2 centuries, they took control of over 70 sectors. In response, a combined force of 4 Space Marine chapters, 2 Titan Legions, and more than 30 Imperial Guard regiments participated as part of a massive Imperial crusade to retake what the Imperium had lost to the Red Angel's assault. 90% of the territory that had been lost to Angron's forces was eventually recovered by the Imperium's defenders. This protracted campaign is known in Imperial archives as the Dominion of Fire. Angron had spent much of the 10 millennia following the Horus Heresy, attempting to restore some level of unity amongst the divided warbands of what had once been his legion. Then the emergence of the Devourer of Stars, a massive space hawk into orbit around Angron's demon world, provided just the opportunity he had been looking for to recreate some semblance of common purpose for his scattered legion. The Space Hawk proved sufficiently large enough to carry large numbers of chaotic troops into real space. This is how the forces of chaos unexpectedly emerged from the warp aboard the Space Hawk in the Armageddon system. The arrival of Angron at Armageddon probably had nothing to do with Angron's own desires. Rather, the location was determined by the chaotic currents of the warp, which sent his Space Hawk to Armageddon, possibly at the whim of Khorne, if there was any intent behind the Hulk's course at all. Busy containing an already big rebellion, the Imperial forces were caught by surprise when a Space Hawk, the Devourer of Stars, suddenly emerged from the warp in the Armageddon system. On board the Devourer of Stars, the demon Primarch Angron led millions of Chaos cultists known as the Children of the Sanguinary Unholiness and the 12, the Crore Praetorians, the 12 strongest demons of Khorne, whose lives and deeds most pleased their wretched blood god. Chaos Space Marines from the World Eater's Legion and hordes of other demonic creatures dedicated to the blood god also poured from the Space Hulk onto the surface of Armageddon and swept across the land. Unknown to the forces of chaos, the great company of Space Wolf Astartes, led by the chapter's Great Wolf Logan Grimnar, had been assigned to the defense of this sector of the Imperium, and they moved quickly to provide aid to the beleaguered defenders as soon as they received the astropathic distress message from Armageddon, describing the chaotic invasion of the Hive World. Huge battles erupted, many of which led by Angron himself, but ultimately reinforcement from the Grey Knights were able to defeat the Demon Prince, hurling his spirit back into the warp from where he could not return for over 100 Terran years. Mortarion, also known as the Death Lord, was the Primarch of the Death Guard Space Marine Legion. Within the Eye of Terror, Mortarion was elevated to become a Demon Prince by Nurgle, and given control of a demon world, now known as the Plague Planet, which he molded into a new and despicable form, making it a virtual copy of Barbarous, placing himself in his adoptive father's position as its chief tyrant. Mortarion descends upon the battlefield on wings of tethered leather, diseased and corrupted, made monstrous in form by the warping powers of chaos. Mortarion is a twisted angel of death, driven by hatred and bitterness. He brings decay, sickness, despair, and fear to all those who witness his dark magistry. During the Battle of Cronovan, Mortarion slew Garonitin, the Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights chapter. In his place, the Grey Knights elevated the hero, Kaldor Drago, amidst the din of the battlefield, and Drago immediately vowed vengeance against the Demon Primarch. Alone and unaided, Drago smashed his way through Mortarion's bodyguards of Plague Marines, struck the ancient Primarch to the ground, and carved Garonitin's name on the Demon Prince's diseased heart. Though Mortarion ultimately escaped, it would be many long Terran years before he could enter the mortal realm once more. Drago's insult would not soon be forgotten, as the Demon Primarch vowed his vengeance against the upstart mortal. In the year 999 of the 41st millennium, upon a far-flung hellworld, Mortarion received word that his brother Guilliman had awakened. Mortarion raged a cold and virulent storm of anger whirling around him until its echoes in real space seeded 7 new and terrible plagues upon the luckless Imperial worlds. Mirrored amid plans that were nearing fruition, the Demon Primarch of the Death Guard could not yet act to strike at Guilliman. Instead, as he stared with glowing eyes across the mist parade grounds of his plague planet, and the massed ranks of Death Guards that assembled, Mortarion vowed that he would render Guilliman and his empire to rot soon enough. With the blackness of the Noctis Eterna descended Mortarion. He led his army into the fabled realm of Ultramar. His meticulously planned 7-part campaign would bring untold ruination to all of Ultramar, while Guilliman was away on his crusade. When Guilliman returned from his galaxy-spanning Indominus crusade, tactically, Mortarion and his fellow commanders now found themselves evenly matched, their offensives blocked at every turn by the Ultramarines and their Primarch's precise counters. A new stage of the war began. Primarch met Primarch as Guilliman confronted Mortarion, the two brothers fighting to a deadlock before the Chaos forces mysteriously withdrew under cover of a virus bomb, and that was the last time Guilliman saw Mortarion. Magnus the Red, known as the Red Cyclops, was the Primarch of the Thousand Sons Traitor Legion. After the Emperor defeated Horus on his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, at the end of the Battle of Terra, and the Traitor Legions fled from Terra, Magnus and the Thousand Sons returned to the demon world that Tzeentch had prepared for them within the Eye of Terror. They called it the Planet of the Sorcerers. During the 32nd millennia, Magnus the Red was determined to have his revenge for the devastation of his homeworld of Prospero at the hands of his former brother Primarch, Lemonruss, and his legion. He devised a cunning plan to lure the Space Wolves into a trap, in what became known as the Battle of the Fang. This was in order to enact his final vengeance against them. Magnus was bailed to trick the Space Wolves into attacking the planet of Gangava, and while busy fighting a strong garrison of Magnus' allies, the Legion fleet of the Thousand Suns and their chaotic levies appeared in orbit over Fenris. The bulk of the Thousand Suns were prepared to descend upon the Space Wolves' homeworld and level the Fang itself. The real reason behind the retaliation strike was not simply to strike at the Space Wolves out of revenge, although most of Magnus' Legion were led to believe this, but to prevent the Space Wolves from successfully creating any successor chapters. To the Demon Primarch, preventing the creation of a new successor of Leman Russ was a goal without prize, and so what remained of his Thousand Sons Legion would be sacrificed, if need be, to put an end to the Space Wolf's dream. Overcome with fury and shame at his folly, the Great Wolf Herrick Ironhelm immediately took ships to Fenris, bringing the might of the Space Wolves with him. Finally, on the upper slopes of the Fang itself, the Great Wolf met Magnus in battle on the final day of the siege. The Great Wolf pummeled the injured Demon Primarch with his power fist, hitting him again and again, smashing him against the rocks of the Fang's flanks. Magnus cried out, a cry of pain that had not been heard since Lemanrus had mortally wounded his first body on Prospero 1,000 years before. For a moment it looked like Magnus had lost the will to fight. He absorbed the punishment, his back arching against the cliff. But then he began to remember himself. Even now, even after enduring so much, having absorbed so much pain, his essential strength, the core of fire that fueled him, remained invalid. The Great Wolf was driven back towards the edge and beaten down to his knees. The Demon Primarch had proved to be too powerful for him, and Magnus slew Herrick, but not before taking a terrible wound himself. Magnus took some small consolidation in his legion's defeat, for ultimately he had achieved his primary objective. Magnus the Red personally destroyed the Space Wolf's gene laboratories within the Fang. Years later, Magnus was made aware of the resurrection of his brother Guilliman, and contrary to Mortarion, Magnus gave a blooming laugh of utter delight, like a fortune-teller who flips the final tarot card and gains sudden insight. The Crimson Knight saw now before him a path of glorious fate, where before he had seen a wilderness of confusion. Magnus the Red caught Guilliman and his army on their way to Terra, and with a booming incantation, Magnus enacted a well-prepared spell. Etheric tendrils clamped tight around the starships of the Terran Crusade, and with a vast convulsion wreck, dragged them deep within the raging heart of the Maelstrom. Chaos forces successfully assaulted the Terran Crusade fleet inside the warp, ultimately forcing the Imperials to surrender. Guilliman and his forces were imprisoned aboard the Blackstone Fortress. But the Imperials were freed from their cells aboard the massive alien Starfort by the intervention of the Harlequin Shadowseer, Slyndri Violwalker, and the fallen angel Cypher, in return for Guilliman's promise to allow Cypher an audience before the Emperor. But this was Magnus's plan all along. He knew Guilliman, once freed, would travel to Terra via the long-forgotten webway portal that led directly to the Imperial Palace. Magnus would travel with them and attack the Imperium at its core. Luckily, Guilliman realized his brother's plot, and instead used another path that led to Luna, Terra's only natural moon. On Luna, Magnus the Red battled Guilliman and his forces, but ultimately was bested by the combined force of Guilliman, the Sisters of Silence, and the Harlequins. Magnus was not slain. He now quietly builds up his forces on the planet of sorcerers, which is now restored to real space. The Crimson King knows that he will soon have another opportunity to lay low the Imperium that had betrayed him and destroyed all he once loved. Horus Lupercal was the Primarch of the Luna Wolf's Legion. The tragic tale of Horus does not end with his death aboard the Vengeful Spirit. His body was enshrined on the demon world of Malium, that the sons of Horus claimed for their own within the Eye of Terror, after they fled Terra at the end of the heresy. Horus's corpse resided there for several hundred years in the early 31st millennium, before the body was stolen by the corrupt apothecary Fabius Bile and the Emperor's Children Traitor Legion during the Slave Wars. They wanted to clone the body of the War Master to bring Horus back to life so that he might lead the Traitor Legions once more in an attempt to conquer the Imperium. But Abaddon, the former first captain of the 16th Legion, reasserted his control over the entire Legion, proclaiming himself Horus's successor. He led an assault upon the Emperor Children's fortress, and believing that the continued worship of their Legion's dead Primarch had trapped the traitor Legion and led them to the brink of destruction, Abaddon utterly destroyed Horus's corpse and claimed the War Master's Power Claw, the talent of Horus, as his own, as well as the title of War Master of Chaos. Loregar Aurelian was the Primarch of the Word-Bearers Traitor Legion. Eventually, the atrocities committed by the Word-Bearers allowed for Loregar's ascension to demonhood, becoming the equal of a god in the eyes of his legion. It is said that his birth scream, as a demon prince of chaos undivided, echoed across the Imperium with triumphant vindication. His faith and devotion to chaos rewarded with immortality and unbridled power. He has since isolated himself within the Templum Inficio of the demon world of Sikaris, where he has remained for thousands of years, forbidding anyone to interrupt his meditation, thus allowing the Word-Bearers to be taken over by a dark council of the Legion's most powerful dark apostles. Alpharius Omegon, also known as the Hydra, was actually two twin Primarchs that led the Alpha Legion. During the Horus Heresy, Alpharius Omegon appeared to be more interested in proving his own legion's worth by fighting the best of the Loyalist legions. That became his downfall when Alpharius encountered Rogodorn during the Battle of Pluto. The two Primarchs fought one another in an epic life-or-death duel. Lord Dorn finished off Alpharius with a deadly chop of his mighty chainsword into the top of his skull. With the death of their Primarch, the Alpha Legion fleet withdrew and retreated from Pluto. At the moment of his twin Primarch's death, Omegon sensed the death of his sibling, and like he had done so many times before, Omegon immediately took upon himself his brother's name, and permanently assumed the mantle of the Primarch of the 20th Legion. In the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, the Alpha Legion did not retreat to the Eye of Terror like the other traitor legions. Instead, they moved on to the Galactic East, following new objectives for their own plot. Whether or not being brought to battle with the Ultramarines was one of these objectives is unknown, but it occurred all the same. It was on the world known as Escrador that Alpharius and Guilliman would meet for the last time. Believing that Guilliman would adopt his standard deployment procedure, as later outlined in the Codex Astartes, Alpharius was surprised by the Ultramarines, as a splinter force, including their Primarch, made a quick strike at the Alpha Legion's headquarters. Alpharius was reportedly happy with such a development, as it allowed him to demonstrate the superiority of his flexible and unexpected military strategies over the notoriously precise, methodical, and perhaps even tactical Ultramarines. Both Primarchs met in combat, and Alpharius was killed, believing the combat over, for what Astartes Legion could ever survive the loss of their Primarch in battle. The Ultramarines were taken by surprise by the remaining elements of the Alpha Legion when they struck back a day later. Ultramarines who had launched the assault on the Traitor Legion's headquarters were attacked so mercilessly that by the time they had returned to the main body of the Ultramarine force, their casualties were almost total. After a week of constant fighting and heavy losses, the Ultramarine strike force managed to reunite with their main elements and quickly evacuated the planet. Even though they had lost their Primarch, the Alpha Legion had soundly beaten the Ultramarines, who proceeded to bombard their foe's position from orbit. It should be noted, however, that Alpharius and Omegon's death is still considered suspect even by the Ultramarines, and one or both Primarchs may still be at large. And those were 40 facts on the whereabouts of the Traitor Primarchs. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, share it with your friends. And of course, comment down below, let me know which one of the Traitor Primarchs you would like to see return. And then also, which one do you believe could have the biggest redemption, or could they even be redeemed? I know we have Magnus the Red and Perturabo. I really feel that Loregar will probably come in at the very, very end of any type of story that we ever get from GW, because he is kind of the reason why the Horus Heresy started, and he is the main chaos worshiper, I guess you could say. But other than that, what other Traitor Primarch do you think could come next? Can't wait to talk to you guys in the comment section below. If you guys have any other suggestions, just comment down below. We'll try to create a video for you guys. And of course, if you want to support us a little bit more, jump on over to Patreon. A simple $1 a month helps us create more videos for you guys. If you can't, we understand. Simply by liking, commenting, and sharing, it helps out the channel. But with that said, I'll see you tomorrow. This was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.